Welcome to another weekly Forex forecast. First things first, two bigger news events next week to consider. First, we have the CPI data for the US dollar, and for this watch list, also relevant is the interest rate decision from the RBNC, since we have quite a lot of New Zealand dollar pairs on the watch for the coming week. We start with the DXY on the weekly time frame. Last week ended on a very strong week, while tapping into an area of interest here, and this could indicate a potential turnaround. On the 4 hour, we see that price tapped into the area of interest with basically full price action, and nicely with the momentum candle retraced and starting to form some form of continuation pattern. However, it's kind of undecided. It could also potentially become something like a running channel to move higher up. We have another next bigger area of interest here at around 104.8. So for me right now, I'm a bit undecided, and I don't think that the dollar pairs will do much before the release of the CPI data. So therefore, I have to be a bit more careful on the dollar related pairs and look for very clean price action. On Euro US dollar, we see basically the same picture, just inverted. We tapped on the weekly with a very strong wick into a small area of interest between a major high, as well as in the DXY. This could be a sign for a reversal. So at this stage, when we go down to the lower time frame, we see here we had a gap that was closed, moving straight to the 1 hour time frame. We are in kind of a range. We had some potential trades here. This was a mistrade for me, which I discussed in the trade reviews. As well, there is a losing trade in here, and we are now within this price range from here to here. So for me at the moment, also with the positioning of the DXY, it's kind of undecided. So what I'm looking for is if price moves back into this area for a potential short, if the DXY is going further up, or otherwise I will just wait until price gives me a clear signal to maybe break below and give me some form of continuation pattern outside of this range. Next, Australian dollar, US dollar on the weekly time frame. We see we had a very strong bullish candle with wicking through two areas of interest. We could consider this one as a major area of interest, or actually a value area. And I'm looking now, as it stands on the weekly, for a continuation long. On the daily time frame, the whole washout was basically within 1 day, and then price started to turn around and had a very nice bullish momentum candle on Thursday before price started to stall on Friday again. So again, we have to be careful with the positioning of the DXY, but looking just at Australian dollar, US dollar at the moment, for me, this is more a short-term buy. We have here a small liquidity point, which we have to take care, but price potentially starts to form a continuation pattern. So what I'm looking right now, we have here a very small base on the lower time frame, here a near miss. So I'm looking for price to move away, form a second top, and then for a third touch for a continuation long. Even within this small range here to the top of the liquidity point, we have 44 pips. So that should be enough to manage a trade in case of the DXY is moving higher up and Australian dollar will roll over. So we will see, but there is enough room to manage. And again, that might be a trade before the CPI data, to be in and out before the CPI data, just within this range play here. New Zealand dollar, US dollar looks very similar, except that we have two bullish weekly candles here. And last week, actually, we tapped with the wick, we tapped into the small value area here, and are now, just from the price action point of view, we are looking for a continuation long, moving down straight to the 1 hour time frame. We were already last week looking for a potential long in this area here, but then got the washout and eventually price started to move up. We are now looking for a confirmation of a continuation long. So at the moment, I'm looking for price to at least form a second base here for a continuation up, or even tap into this small liquidity point here. Moving on to Euro Australian dollar on the weekly, price reached this previous high, another value area, before then starting to sell off again towards the end of the week. Moving down to the daily time frame, we see we had 3 bearish candles with 1 undecided here, and are now starting to form some form of continuation. Moving down to the straight to the 1 hour. For me, it's kind of undecided, because overall my bias is still risk off. So risk off would mean Euro Australian dollar long. However, the price action right now is also not the cleanest. We had here the first continuation after this initial impulsive run, which could have been shorted, and then had price retesting this small liquidity point here, and now is starting to form something more complex. So just from the sequence wise, it looks more, price action looks more clean for a short. However, my overall bias is still risk off, so therefore a long on Euro Australian dollar. So I'm looking for very clear price action. So what I need at the moment is either price to finish a clean 1, 2, 3 structure for a continuation short, which is my preferred scenario at the moment, or a breakout of the previous high here, this small high, and then give me some form of a long continuation pattern. Next, Euro New Zealand dollar. It's actually exactly the same play as Euro Australian dollar, except that the short looks slightly cleaner, because here we have already 2 bearish weeks, and last week we had a very, very strong week, washing out all the orders above this value area here, and are therefore looking for a short in this area. The long does not look as clean, or not as possible as in Euro Australian dollar, because here we see we left a small gap to this previous small area of interest. So what I'm looking now is to finish at least a two-touch structure. Here we are on the 4 hour, so that's already quite a big structure for finishing the move at least into this area of interest here, potentially even further. And I'm not looking on this pair for a long reversal, since it did not finish the move here, not like in Euro Australian dollar, where we are coming from at least an area of interest. Next, Canadian dollar yen. So the yen pairs, they all look the same. So we had very strong aggressive sell-off the last 5 weeks, actually 4 weeks, and now last week we had the first week of some form of recovery. And here very clearly on the weekly, the Canadian dollar yen tapped into, this is not a very, very strong area of interest. It's just slightly above this previous structure here. It's basically the start of the previous structure. It's a bit more clear on the lower time frame. This is weekly, right? So what I'm looking at the moment is overall with the risk off bias. So clearly yen should become stronger, but however, after such an aggressive run, so there's still enough room for a bigger recovery. So moving down to the 1 hour, straight to the 1 hour, we see that price left some areas of interest here. We have a clear liquidity point in this area. So basically this move up here is the week from last week, right, on the weekly candle, and we now see that price is starting to form some bigger structures in almost all the yen pairs. So I'm looking for price to finish here a continuation structure, retesting this high, which it already did here, and then rejection for finishing at least this move to this liquidity point, or otherwise in line with my overall bias for risk of just price tapping into this liquidity point for a short-term sell then, or for a continuation sell of the higher time frame bias. But even just this range here is more than 3%, so even if it looks small, it's still, these are huge moves and well worth considering short-term buy to finish the overall structure. Moving on to New Zealand dollar yen on the weekly time frame, exactly the same picture. We tapped into a smaller area of interest and finished the week on a very, very strong wick with an overall bullish candle. Moving straight down to the 1 hour time frame, we see the same picture again like we saw just a moment ago on Canadian dollar yen. Price moved up aggressively towards the end of the week, started to consolidate, so I'm waiting for price to finish continuation structure to at least play the range to the next more significant area of interest or even for a further recovery, and then will adjust my bias as soon as price is reaching some of these areas. Next is Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar. We see that price, after starting to reverse here on the third touch, after tapping in this higher time frame value area, is now in a sideways consolidation. We are looking for a continuation short. We see on the 4 hour that price is in a fairly big structure and was tapping into this small area of interest here and is now forming some slightly more complex structure. At the moment, I'm looking for price to go up one more time to finish this 1, 2, 3, basically fill this wick for a next leg down. However, the structure is very big, so I need a better confirmation here. So at least the 4 hour retrace candle, or then some form of continuation pattern, flag pattern on the lower time frame. Then pound Australian dollar on the weekly time frame, same as we saw many times before. Today we had a very, very large wick tapping into actually 2 higher time frame value areas. This one was more of an area of interest, and here a value area. I'm looking right now for a continuation short into at least these areas here. Moving down to the 4 hour first, we see on the 4 hour that price came from this expanding structure here and had this one wick washing out the orders and tapping into the higher time frame, and is now forming a bigger consolidation below this small liquidity point here. We see this clear on the 1 hour, but can already say that the structure is also slightly bigger. So it's a 4 hour structure we are forming here. So we need also a higher time frame rejection in this area for a continuation short, or a lower time frame flag pattern for an entry. Then moving on to pound New Zealand dollar on the weekly. Pound New Zealand dollar actually left the small gap to the higher time frame value area, but tapped into this area of interest and is in the second bearish week in a row. So there is still the possibility of price to go all the way down before then going up again and filling this value area gap. So at the moment, I'm looking for a continuation short. Moving down to the lower time frame. On the 4 hour time frame, we see we had a very impulsive leg here below this small area of interest. Going to the 1 hour time frame, we have here a small liquidity point, the initial start of this last drop, which is also below this small area of interest we saw. And we have this low here, which is also fairly close for this size of structure. So for me to consider a continuation short, I want to see price move into these areas, preferably retesting this low and then giving me some form of lower time frame continuation pattern to enter a short. So that's it for this week with the weekly Forex forecast. These are my main pairs on watch. I still have pound Canadian dollar running as a live position. I already covered that in the last trade reviews as a break-even trade. So far, we can have a short look on the pound Canadian dollar, which is my open running position. I kept this one open over the weekend. Price was moving very aggressively into this small area of interest before then starting to turn around. There was a falling wedge towards the end of the move where I clearly saw that price lost momentum. That's why I entered on the 1 hour, and I'm now looking for a further continuation long to actually close the gap here to the higher time frame value area, which is in line with my overall bias. But pound and Canadian dollar are both not very strong currencies. Actually, Canadian dollar I consider the weakest currency for the coming week. So far the trade is just on break even. And yeah, I would not take this pair otherwise in my main watch list for this week if it would not have been already an open trade. Yeah, okay, that's it. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Bye bye.